On behalf of the Armenian National Committee of the Middle East, I welcome you all to tonight's lecture. On June 2000, Turkey. US congressmen, with the support of the Armenian American community, introduced a new resolution in the US Congress that urges the Republic of Turkey to safeguard its Christian heritage and to return confiscated church properties. Tonight, Ken Hachikian, who has been a driving force in the pursuit for the recognition of the Armenian genocide, will share his experience with us. Ken grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, as a second-generation Armenian American. He graduated from Harvard College with a BA in economics with honor in 1971 and has an MBA from Harvard Business School with high distinction in 1973. Ken started his career with the Boston Consulting Group, where he provided consulting to Fortune 1000 companies from 1973 to 1982. Subsequently, he has been Chief Executive Officer or Chief Operations Officer of several businesses. In 2003, he became a partner in the Stonegate Group, which is a private investment banking and financial consulting firm. He has consistently been active in his community. In 2001, he became and is still serving as the chairman of the Armenian National Committee of America, the largest grassroots Armenian American advocacy organization in the US. Hachikian will talk about the question of return of Turkish stolen church properties in the US Congress. What is the role of Armenian activists? What are the implications for Turkey? And whether this is a precursor to a meaningful discussion of reparations for the Armenian genocide. After the lecture, Ken will gladly answer your questions. Please join me in welcoming Ken Hachikian.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you to the Armenian National Committee of the Middle East for organizing this evening's lecture. Thank you to all of you for taking time in your otherwise busy schedules to come and hear me. It is a pleasure for me and an honor to be here in Lebanon. This is my first visit to Beirut, and I have been kept very busy, both many responsibilities, and I've had some time to do a little bit of sightseeing. The biggest impression I have is of your food. It's been wonderful, but I have one complaint, which is that I've eaten too much. So, but I've enjoyed very much the culture and the community, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I also want to thank the Armenian National Committee of Lebanon and all of their supporters and organizers who have assisted this evening. As Vera said, I will address the issue of return of churches resolution in the U.S. Congress, which I believe is a momentous step in advancing the issue of reparations for the Armenian people. As I'm sure everybody here knows, the Catholicos just held a 3-day conference in Antilias on the issue of reparations, and he had international legal experts from around the world who addressed various matters and gave their counsel. And as the Catholicos and I have spoken, the political impetus in the U.S. Congress has advanced this issue, and you will hear from my remarks some of the practical implications of what is already occurring on this front. So I will share with you today the Armenian National Committee of America's contribution to the great cause of securing for our nation the resolution and reparations owed to our people for Turkey's crime of genocide. My perspective here today, born of my experience and shaped on the front lines of our common cause, is a political one. My views and those of my colleagues have nonetheless been meaningfully informed, enriched, and consistently energized by the far body of academic inquiry on this subject. But our struggle, and what I'm going to talk about today, is in the political arena. My comments about our effort in the United States to press Turkey to return churches will, I hope, inform you about the urgency of such efforts and also inspire you and our allies around the world to join us in this undertaking. We must continue our efforts to prevail intellectually, but we must also not forget that there is an essential battle to be joined in the halls of our government, and not just in the American government. This must occur throughout the world. For what we seek is nothing less than a turning of the tide. As we approach the end of a century, I have to sadly observe, in which all the moral and material costs of the Armenian genocide have fallen upon the victims of this crime, we seek for ourselves and all humanity a new era, a better century guided by the ethic that the burdens of this genocide will, as they must be borne by the perpetrator. The return of churches, Turkey's surrender, voluntary or otherwise, of the thousands of church properties it stole from Armenians, Assyrians, Greeks, Syriacs, and other Christians prior to, during, and after the Armenian genocide era would represent a meaningful first step by the Turkish government toward accepting its responsibility for a truthful and just resolution of this still unpunished crime against humanity. It would as well mark a major blow for the cause of international religious freedom in a corner of the world sadly not known for its pluralism, but rather for the depths of its intolerance. Our advocacy in Washington, D.C. on this issue has, over the past year, taken its place alongside of our Armenian genocide recognition efforts, our struggle against Ankara's denials, our other work on issues of concern to our community. All of our community's advocacy investments are, at their heart, aimed at promoting Armenia's viability. Our North Star, the light that guides us as we navigate these waters, is the survival of the Armenian people, the security of the Armenian homeland, and the strengthening of the Armenian nation. That is why we must seek a truthful and just resolution of the Armenian genocide. We're not seeking truth simply for the sake of truth. For all the world, and certainly we as Armenians know all too well the reality of the Armenian genocide and the ongoing consequences of this crime. We are in no need of further affirmation, nor of vengeance or vindication. No, we seek truth. Truth in the name of justice, and justice in the name of survival. That is why we struggle against Ankara's denial of the truth and obstruction of justice. Reasons of morality, of course, compel us to demand respect for human life and to stand up in the name of our ancient faith and in the spirit of the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide against Mass Murder. The cause of genocide prevention, a core moral imperative of our age, requires us that we, as witnesses to the depths of man's inhumanity to man, bring the full measure of our devotion to ending forever the cycle of genocide. Turkey's denial of truth and obstruction of justice for the Armenian genocide sets a dangerous precedent, an unacceptable precedent, emboldening potential perpetrators that their crimes can be committed with impunity. Nowhere is this more urgent for us than in deterring Turkey from committing renewed aggression against the Armenian people. For Armenia cannot be safe as long as it has on its border an overarmed and unrepentant perpetrator of genocide. We seek as well for the citizens of Turkey a transformation of Turkish society, a Turkey that fully accepts responsibility for the Armenian genocide would very likely be one that is on the road to rehabilitation into a more just and tolerant society. Sadly, we've seen few signs of progress on this front. In fact, in recent years, all we've heard are alarm bells. In today's Turkey, Hrant Dink's killer is treated like a hero, and most of those guilty for his assassination are let free. Armenians are regularly threatened with renewed deportations, while the remaining Christian heritage of Anatolia is being systematically erased. The Turkey's most popular films and books are about scapegoating and striking down treasonous minorities. Some of you may have seen just yesterday that there were demonstrations in Turkey, very racist demonstrations saying essentially, we didn't get you before, we're going to come get you now. It's bone-chilling to see that even today this occurs in Turkey. Turkey today is not simply an unrepentant post-genocidal state, but a pre-genocidal society lashing out at imagined enemies and seeking out its next targets. What is needed is not simply a change in Turkey's policies, but rather a profound, long-term movement driven by both international and domestic pressure to rehabilitate Turkey into a modern, tolerant, and pluralistic society that, as proof of its reform, willingly forfeits the fruits of its genocidal crimes. Justice is vital for Armenia's survival. Consider the vast and devastating demographic, material, geographic, cultural legacy of the Armenian genocide. The core elements of Armenian viability were very nearly destroyed forever. This concern is very clearly not just about our past, for upon a just resolution of this crime rests the very ability of Armenians to restore the elements of viability that have long sustained our nation and finally close the wounds of genocide that so crippled, and because they were so deep, may yet kill our poor and orphan nation. These are the stakes. At risk is our very survival, not our dignity or simply our pride, but our very place at the table of nations. That is why we seek the truth. That is why we demand justice. And part of justice, perhaps amongst the first measures that can be realistically secured, is the return of our sacred sites. A first front, but not a final one, in the struggle for survival. Our church is always at the fore, fighting for justice and truth and an enduring peace amongst men. Our efforts on this front, as have been widely reported, begin with the introduction, as Vera indicated, in June of last year of House Resolution 306, the quote, Return of Churches Resolution, by two of the most senior members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Ed Royce and Congressman Howard Berman. This religious freedom measure was launched in parallel with an Armenian genocide resolution. Congressman Royce launched House Resolution 306 by stating, quote, conditions in Turkey have deteriorated with violent hate crimes increasingly linked to religion. My resolution introduces Turkey to protect its vulnerable religious minorities. His Democratic colleague Howard Berman said, by expropriating church properties, harassing worshipers, and refusing to grant full legal status to some Christian groups, Turkey has failed to fulfill its obligation as a signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which requires, quote, freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. We are very gratified by the broad bipartisan support for the resolution as it was launched with several original co-sponsors. The resolution's text showed that it called upon the government of Turkey to honor its international obligations to return confiscated Christian church properties. And I'm going to read you the operative clauses. First, to end all forms of religious discrimination. Second, to allow the rightful church and lay owners of Christian church properties, without hindrance or restriction, to organize and administer prayer services, religious education, clerical training, appointments in succession, religious gatherings, social services, including ministry to the needs of the poor and infirm, and other religious activities. Third, return to their rightful owners all Christian churches and other places of worship, monastery, schools, hospitals, monuments, relics, holy sites, and other religious properties, including movable properties such as artwork, manuscripts, vestments, vessels, and other artifacts. I would just say parenthetically here, back then, the church didn't simply own the churches. They owned schools, they may have owned hospitals, they owned cemeteries, they owned a significant part of the central communities. Fourth, to allow the rightful Christian church and lay owners of Christian church properties to preserve, reconstruct, and repair as they see fit all Christian churches and other places of worship. The resolution also spoke meaningfully to Armenians and our allies who share a devotion to a truthful and just resolution of the Armenian genocide that morally and materially makes whole the victims of this horrific crime. Its immediate purpose was directly challenging and eventually reversing the vast destruction visited upon religious sites during the genocide, as well as Turkey's official and ongoing post-genocide destruction of church properties, desecration of holy sites, and discrimination against Christian communities. Through its adoption, its sponsors sought to add the powerful voice of the U.S. Congress and the full moral authority of the American people to the international defense of religious freedom for the Christian nations residing within the borders of present-day Turkey. It held great meaning for the members of the U.S. Congress that the territories of present-day Turkey are home to many of the most important centers of early Christianity, most notably Nicaea, Ephesus, Chalcedon, and Constantinople, but also that the Turkish government has systematically sought to erase this remarkably rich Christian legacy, including thousands of religious sites. The destruction of these holy sites accelerated during the 1890s and through the Armenian Genocide era. The Armenian Genocide, and more broadly, Ottoman Turkey's genocidal drive to eliminate its entire Christian population, marked a terrible watershed in the history of the Christians of these lands, as the Turkish leadership shifted from a policy of violence and oppression to one of outright systematic, intentional, and state-implemented campaign of ethnic and cultural extermination. The Republic of Turkey, legal heir to the Ottomans, and I might add that at the conference this past couple of days, if one thing was without question totally clear, it was that the Republic of Turkey bears all legal obligations of Ottoman Turkey. But the Republic of Turkey continued these genocidal policies against the remaining Christian population through ethnic cleansing, massacres, destruction of properties, and so on. Estimates are that of the over 2,000 Armenian churches which existed in the early 1900s, far fewer than 50 are functioning today. There are perhaps only 200 that even remain standing. The rest have been ground into dust. Only a small fraction of the historic Christian population that once populated Anatolia remains there today to care for their cultural heritage. The indigenous Christian communities within Turkey's borders continue to this day to endure oppressive restrictions imposed by the government of Turkey on their right to practice their faith in their historic places of worship. These endangered sites, at least those that remain, are nearly all still today in Turkish hands as a direct result of genocide. Many other properties, thousands now emptied, of even ruins, are also illegally in Turkey's possession. The remaining Christians are all too often prevented from praying in their historic churches, which have been desecrated, sometimes used as storage sheds, and in some cases even turned into barns. In very rare instances, such as the Akdama Church, Turkey has undertaken repairs for transparently cynical public relations reasons, but refused to return religious properties to their rightful church owners, instead converting them into museums, where prayer as a rule is prohibited. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, established by Congress, recently designated Turkey as one of a handful of countries on its watch list for a third consecutive year. It has concluded that, quote, over the previous 5 decades, the Turkish state has, using convoluted regulations and undemocratic laws, confiscated hundreds of religious minority properties, primarily those belonging to the Greek Orthodox community, as well as the Armenian Orthodox, Catholics, and Jews. The state has also closed seminaries, denying those communities the right to train clergy. The U.S. State Department, which often goes to great and frequently unreasonable lengths to excuse and apologize for Turkey's conduct, has actually criticized the persecution of Christians in Turkey, including the improper confiscation of these properties. This position is a testament to the high priority American citizens give to religious liberty. Our own Bill of Rights in the United States safeguards religious freedom, and our longstanding leadership in championing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other international covenants has helped protect freedom of faith across the globe. America's enduring commitment to religious freedom was reaffirmed in the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998 and has been underscored in countless pieces of specific legislation. The Turkish government stridently opposed this effort to end faith-based discrimination, to promote religious tolerance and secure the rightful return of the Christian churches, not just because they reject responsibility for past sins, but for their naked fear of the implications for future demands for reparations. The very reason that we took this path is the very reason that they feared it. The United States State Department, I'm sad to report, pressed Congress very hard on this issue to block even the consideration. The State Department attempted to prevent this resolution from even coming up for a vote. They attempted to stifle it in the committee before it could even be considered. Not that they didn't believe that it reflected the right thing, but because they knew it did. This reasoning reflects the fundamental disconnect of a failed foreign policy that prioritizes the sensitivities of the most extremely intolerant elements of Turkish society over the core moral values of the American people. This bipartisan measure attacked head-on the core Ottoman and Kemalist myths about Turkey as a model of tolerance and pluralism. It revealed Turkey's token steps and half measures as political stunts, like its conversion of a church at Akdama into a museum, setting a real and reasonable bar for the Turkish government to meet, namely full freedom of faith and a total return of stolen religious properties. We saw Turkey go after this resolution in every way possible. Soft attacks saying it was unnecessary, harsher attacks saying it would be counterproductive, diplomatic attacks saying that the adoption would somehow upset the fragile Turkey-Armenian protocol process, and finally angry attacks seeking to bully and intimidate U.S. legislators, much the way they attempted and are attempting to bully the legislators in France. These assaults did result in the shameful opposition by the Obama administration to this resolution, but they failed to sway even a single vote. On July 20th of 2011, the House Foreign Affairs Committee voted 43-1 to pass this measure, with the sole dissenting voice coming from a libertarian who opposes every measure that comes before this committee. Soon after this committee vote, and I believe this is very, very significant, and in the wake of a series of judgments on religious property issues in European courts, Turkey's Prime Minister issued an announcement, very limited in scope to be sure, but not meaningful nonetheless, regarding the rights of churches and others to seek the return of certain properties which were confiscated under a 1936 law in Turkey. Sadly, this law only applies to 2 to 3% of all the properties that Turkey confiscated. But the very fact that the Prime Minister felt the need to respond to this issue is telling. When was the last time that Erdogan ever gave something back to the Armenians, or any government in Turkey? This token defensive step was meant to minimize Turkey's obligations. It was not an act of charity on the part of Mr. Erdogan, but it was forced upon him. And I hope all of you understand that as much as we can study this issue, as much as we can turn to lawyers, as much as we can go to the courts, all of which we should do, that there are times when raw political strength is what's necessary to force the issue. This initial step was followed by a letter, unprecedented on our part, to the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, asking her to respond to this, and she in turn reiterated the State Department's support for religious freedoms in Turkey and the restoration by the Turkish government of confiscated religious properties. We have never had a letter or anything in writing from the U.S. government saying that our community is entitled to have confiscated properties back. So, as small a step as that is, I believe it's very significant to have the Secretary of State of the United States write a letter saying that the United States believes that all confiscated properties, the letter doesn't restrict itself to religious, all confiscated properties should be returned to their rightful owners. Needless to say, we welcomed her support, urged her to stand firm on this matter, and offered our help in delivering concrete results. We encouraged, and in addition, Katolikos Adam also wrote a letter to Secretary Clinton expressing a similar perspective. A few months later, just this past December, in response to our advocacy and as a result of relationships that we have built over decades in the U.S. Congress, and I mean literally decades, we were able to get this resolution brought to the floor of the U.S. House. And against the opposition of the administration, against the full opposition of the Turkish and Azeri lobbies, against the opposition of the oil lobbies, we're actually able to bring it to the floor. And we were confident that if we could bring it to the floor, that we would win. And in fact, the opponents of this bill were so embarrassed by their lack of ability to generate opposition that the one concession that they were able to get was to not have what's called a recorded vote, where people actually have to vote aye or nay, because they didn't want anybody to see how few people were opposing it, and instead it passed by a voice vote. It was virtually unanimous, and that goes to tell you what if I could use an American idiom, motherhood and apple pie the issue is of church properties. It's very difficult for anybody to argue against this. Needless to say, we welcome this vote as a powerful victory for religious freedom and as a reflection of the growing consensus that Turkey must, starting with the thousands of stolen Christian church properties and holy sites, accept its responsibility for the full moral and material implications of a truthful and just resolution of the Armenian genocide. So did several members of Congress from across the political spectrum, and I'll just give you two comments. Congressman Ed Royce from California: religious tolerance has long been a problem for Turkey. Turkey has yet to remedy the desecration of the religious properties of over 2 million Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians and Syriacs for the past 100 years. Until these obligations are fulfilled, religious freedom will remain elusive, and frankly, relations with the United States will suffer. Howard Berman, also from California: we want Turkey to follow through on its commitment to return confiscated property of Christian communities and to provide compensation for properties that can't be recovered. The adoption of this resolution has helped challenge many of the myths that Turkey has long propagated in the United States and throughout the world. First among these is that Turkey, far from being tolerant or pluralistic, was literally founded on the violent, wholesale destruction and exile of many ancient Christian nations. The territory of Turkey, once a vital center of Christianity, now has a Christian population of less than 0.1%. Turkey has a history of resolving issues of faith and identity through violence, not tolerance. Examples include its state-sponsored murder and persecution of Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, Cypriots, and Assyrians. We also tore apart the myth that tokenism can be a substitute for wholesale change that Turkey must undertake. Ankara seeks credit for renovating a handful of religious sites and converting them into museums, while seeking to escape criticism for its expropriation of thousands of Christian sites from their rightful owners. We took on Turkey's use of the ugly euphemism, disused religious sites, by making it clear that the overwhelming majority of the Christian parishioners of those churches were brutally and systematically massacred and exiled. Building on this foundation and the growing congressional and American civil society consensus behind the return of churches, we will press our cause forward with courage and confidence. We invite you today, and friends of Armenia and champions of religious liberty from all over the world, to join in this effort. I call upon each and every one of you to bring to bear your ideas, your energy to this struggle, starting with the return of religious properties and extending to the full moral and material restitution and reparations owed by Turkey to the Armenian nation for our lost lives, our stolen territories, our confiscated properties, our desecrated holy sites, and all the costs and unfulfilled opportunities of a post-genocidal century of struggling to survive. This is truly a global undertaking, the success of which will rely upon our friendship and faith, our strength and solidarity. In solemn memory of our forebearers and for the righteousness of our cause, I know we will persevere. Shonarela.